And welcome back inside Brunch from 107.7. My name is Rennie Bishop. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. And we move into the area of gender differentials in the education system. If I'm to quote the education minister, he said, gentlemen in the school system have to step up. That's when he announced that 443 scholarship winners for this year Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Examination. He said that he's aware, like we are, that the gender gap exists in all and most developed countries. But it is an issue that we are not dealing with efficiently, and we have to, in fact, start doing that, where girls are outperforming boys just about at every level. Well, I took time and I looked around at all the opinions expressed and a whole lot of writings, and I came upon a lecturer and educator who has touched on just about every subject that the minister was talking about and just about every subject that folks are talking about, dealing from the question of the social environment where boys are growing up to the area of the world and what the world expects of them in the area of the curriculum and the teachers and those who are prepared to do this and what sort of values we're passing on. I'm speaking of Mr. Raymond Hackett. I am very thankful that you took the time to be with us this morning. How are you, sir?
Extremely well, sir.
You did a lot of exercising before you got here.
Yes.
You proved to be even younger than I am, because you actually went out and you did the walking from one point to the other, but that explains why you look so fit. What we are talking about is gender differential in the education system. Studies can bring you, as you know, any result you go into it expecting. You have been involved in the school system for a long time, so before I put the first question at you, let us talk about your experience and how long you've been involved in the system, just so our listeners understand the basis where we're going.
Well, first of all, I have been in education for the past 54 years. Mm-hmm. I have worked from primary right up to tertiary, and I seem to be still going.
You're still going very strong, evidently. So, like I said, any study can get a result that you put into it. Do you subscribe to the view that there is a gender learning gap, or is this subjective perception? I mean, are we talking about there is a perception gap? Are we talking about a real gap and the reasons for it?
Unfortunately, I have to disagree with a number of people. Mm-hmm. Now, we're in the year 2015. Mm-hmm. Eric Williams burst onto the scene in 1962. In those days, we had a great demand for manpower, and we had to engage in serious manpower planning. Mm-hmm. Today, what we have is a certified society. Diploma factories abound. Mm-hmm. And people are still caught up with this question of who is the brightest and that sort of thing. And I want to propose in my discussion with you this morning that boys may not necessarily be interested in the scholarships. In any case, they don't make as much as those who are into entertainment like yourself. So I want to get into the whole question of differences. You asked me earlier about the differences. Mm-hmm. And I want to it will take just a few minutes, but I think it could be very, very profitable. The first thing we have to understand, human beings are not like dogs or elephants. They do not come programmed. Mm-hmm. They are socialized. And there are a number of institutions that socialize them. So therefore, the school has a particular purpose. It is a serious socialization agency. And that is why I would start by telling you that in any modern society, the school is the socialization agency for schooling. Mm-hmm. So if I have problems, you may have to look at the school as well, but not as the only institution. I also want to tell you that the school is an open system organization. What do I mean by this? This means that it cannot block external influences from penetrating it, mm-hmm. or permeating it. I am saying that schools alone cannot educate our children. So if we have to start blaming the school, we have to go easy. Many structural and cultural factors combine to help the school educate our children. Indeed, I would say that the entire society is responsible for this. It's just not the school or the minister alone. I refer to the home, the mosque, temple or church, the school itself, the media, the arts and the community. Mm-hmm. The structural and cultural influences of society shape the attitudes and values, mores, norms and aspirations of our children. If they are not in the form of role models or ideal dimensions, our children will be led astray. So we have to start asking ourselves questions. Are we as a society going right? Mm-hmm. Before the 1970s, and as I say 1970s, I remember your heyday, our girls used to be protected or shielded, while many of the boys were free to roam. Mm-hmm. Note that in some homes, many boys remained under strict supervision and therefore took to their books. I must say at this point that in the homes where education was valued, children excelled. Unfortunately, in the homes where parents did not know how to get the best out of their children, parental involvement was limited, and therefore their children's academic achievement became limited. Mm-hmm. As far as I can recall, the culture of the 1950s up to the 1970s focused on schooling. Indeed, as a child of the 1960s, when I say as a child of the 1960s, I was a teenager then, I came to realize that everybody wanted to excel in some area, mm-hmm. be it academics, trade, or migration. Very few of us were adrift. We all had a focus, boys as well as girls. So back to the question. We're talking about environmental differences. Mm-hmm. When we talk about environmental differences, we should consider the structural and cultural dimensions of the wider society, as well as the climate and culture of our schools and how they impact our boys. Note that I argued earlier that our girls were sheltered. However, because of the internet and social media, our girls are no longer sheltered. Like the boys, they have started to develop self-concepts and images which lead them to behave in ways which would not project success in school or behavior to be admired. And I'm afraid it will get worse.
Haven't we, the voice in case you just stood, and the voice that you're hearing is that of Mr. Raymond Hackett, lecturer, educator, and the resources available and used widely. I do want to stay into that area of the ascent of girls, for instance. Many say that the feminist movement was responsible for that. First, you is saying you see it of more recent vintage being the internet?
That is a sort of simplistic explanation, you know. There's this fellow by the name of Alvin Toffler. And later on I will refer to him. But at this point it's good to talk a little about him. Mm-hmm. And he says, of course, history says, and he reinforced that we had the days of Fred Flintstone, there's a caveman, prehistoric times, and then we have agricultural society. We went on to industrial society, we went on to now the information age. And unfortunately, the world is not necessarily a time plateau that stands still, you know. Mm-hmm. Every age has its set of values and norms and mores and so on. The internet has certainly speeded it up for us. So when girls, I said earlier, were protected, sheltered. Mm-hmm. They didn't have access to the wider society. Now they're in their bedroom. It's coming to meet them. So we can no longer shelter our girls. And our girls, I went to a school once, and a girl was slapping up a boy, and she says very arrogantly, "It's our time now." And she proceeded to beat him. Mm. So the whole issue of And I will get it because your questions are so structured that by the time we have finished speaking, people will have a very clear idea as to really where we are going and where we're supposed not to go.
The role of teachers. Let's talk about the expectation is what I want to be clear. Girls now are excelling, and you credit the internet as being one of the major the major impetus behind that. They are excelling, and many say that boys are. The expectation level for a lot of them is down, and that is the reason. Do you subscribe to that?
Well, first of all, I want to tell you, what is important is not really the expectations of the teachers. What is now important is the driving force that is pushing boys in a given direction. And remember, people glibly talk about about globalization and the global landscape. Thanks to the internet, our students know all the wrong things that many adults don't know. So the adults have their expectations. The Pope recently indicated that the world is driven by greed. Let me give you this small example that I picked up just yesterday. I love to talk to personnel in schools. And a cleaner was telling me just yesterday that this young man, she saw him at $4,000. I said, what you doing with that? She said, well, that's mine. I work for that. I said, where you got that? I sold weed. What are you going to buy with that? A pair of shoes. She said, what? She says, yes. Your mother knows. No, my mother, that's not my mother's business. This is my business. If a young man in Form 4 can say that is not his mother's business, tell me, what does his mother's expectation have to do with his bling and his esteem in the eyes of his peers?
There is no way we can stop the outside world from coming in. It's there, and it is going to influence them. And the reason I ask you the question as to the expectation level is because cognizant of the external influences. I wanted to ask you what role teachers play, even unwittingly, in reinforcing the expectation of young men. There is a stereotyping that is going on, and that is where I wanted to go with that question.
Well, I like what you say there. What is the role of teachers? First of all, teachers have many roles. And as I told you, I've been teaching for a number of years at all levels. I still interact with teachers in schools. And what has happened because of our paper society? We acquire the degree and we go and we teach. In education, there are about 4 dimensions for schooling. When you are a teacher and you have to educate, you have to be aware of something we call the cognitive domain. This is, you deal with the mind. You have something called the affective domain. And if you read any business review today, you'll see that in business, success comes with the ability to interact with other people. You have to educate them in that direction. Then there's this thing called the psychomotor. You coordinate your muscles to promote skills and so on. But for me, the most important is the psychomotor domain. Somebody emphasized that in 2006, apart from a man called Bloom. And if you examine yourself, and I've been examining you for some time, your strongest strength is ability to interact with people. Once you have that, no one can hold you back. We do not teach these things in schools. Our ministers of education, they make a lot of noise about scholarships. One writer said recently, the people who run the world are the people who got C's in school. The people in the A's are the researchers. I may have gotten some A's, but I cannot come. My finance, where is it? So the whole idea is that we need teachers, first of all, who are visionaries. And I look for a word that will rhyme with visionary, and the best I can find is missionary. You have to be a visionary, and you have to be a missionary, you have to be caring, you have to be nationalistic. So, in other words then, when you educate a child, you do not educate that child for a scholarship, because you're creating a clever devil. What you're doing You're educating a man who can think critically. So the politicians will not come and mama-guy him. I am not criticizing any particular politician, but I'm building a nation. Mm-hmm. You must be able to think critically. You must have some sense of nationalism. You need an ideology of caring, innovating, developing, creating. And if you have an education system like that, tell me, how are you going to hold back your country? But what we do, we send them to school, they pass the CXC, the CAPE, we send them to university, and then it's time to lie on the avenue and make money otherwise.
You're looking at this we're looking through from the vantage point of the student, but you also made the point in an article last year that talks about the type of teachers who are trying to impart to these young minds. So what you just identified there, a lot of the teachers from your statement are in fact products of that sort of teaching.
By the society.
And as products of that kind of teaching or society, then they are now passing the same thing on. Isn't it the horse being out of the stable? At what point can you start to change this dynamic then?
I am. If I talk, people will say I'm a madman, but I'll say it nonetheless. It takes a generation to stabilize a society. The present generation seems to be lost. But who's there to teach them? These very teachers who made the first generation go in a given direction. We have to reconceptualize our whole concept of schooling. If you go to most scholarship schools, people get scholarships through cramming, not innovating, not creating.
Sadly, yes.
You know, one famous artist told me in Trinidad here that if you look at many of the Calypsonians and the artists and the sculptors and so on, we are their scholarships. But you cannot touch them when it comes to creativity, innovation. So we have to start finding a way to teach people to innovate, to create, and above all, to love their country. If you engage in corruption and you engage in ripping off people, your fellow beings, how can I say you are nationalist? You believe in nation and building on national development. And that is what education is. You see, if you look at some of the progressive countries in the world, they do not look at today. They look at the future. Hedge money, hegemony, they call it. How do we stay on top forever? All that is impossible, but nonetheless, they try it. And in many ways, they succeed for a time. Where are we succeeding? We just aping. You have been away and you'll understand. And this doesn't mean that the people away are any better than we, and you can prove that. It's just that our focus is not right. By the way, let me just say something before people get the wrong idea. Gender differential. It's not a national issue, you know. It's not confined. It's worldwide.
All over the world, yes.
Worldwide, and there are many reasons responsible for that.
Well, and that is the next area of inquiry I'm coming at you. Just so that you know, our guest is Raymond Hackett, lecturer and educator, is our guest this morning. We are talking about gender differential in educational achievement. You cite global reports arguing that socioeconomic status, ethnicity, geographic location, and those things will affect how a child perform academically. Continue to expand on that, because that is from where we started. In the Trinidad context, expand on that a bit for me.
Well, first of all, you know, a lot of us in Trinidad and Tobago, we use terms that we do not necessarily understand. And I think it is only fair for me to attempt to define these key variables that you mentioned. And I simply want to remind people or tell people that when we talk of socioeconomic status, we refer to an individual's social standing or class in society. That individual may be a member of the upper class, middle class, working class, or even the underclass. For those who wonder what is underclass, the vagrant and people who hate Skid Row, members of the underclass. The point is that class status is often measured as a combination of education, income, and occupation. That's important to hold on to. Let us talk about that touchy variable, ethnicity. Ethnicity refers to a group in a population whose members identify with one another on the basis of common nationality or shared cultural traditions. And I'm very interested in the shared cultural traditions. For example, in Trinidad and Tobago, we have Trinidadians and Tobagonians of East Indian descent, Trinidadians and Tobagonians of African descent. More often than not, I'm talking about the geography aspect now, more often than not, we make a distinction between urban and rural geographical location. Education-wise and entertainment-wise, there seems to be few differences emerging between the urban and rural geographical location. The motorcar and other forms of motorized transport, the internet, daily travel between urban and rural centers has seen to this. Indeed, people in Trinidad and Tobago now seem to perceive politics, crime, aspirations to wealth, all in similar ways, in spite of geographical locations. In Trinidad and Tobago, the lessons industry has emerged, and now I'm getting to the point. The industry is now accepted as contributing profoundly to student success and academic performance. Parents in the upper and middle classes, in addition, have been described as being the main beneficiaries of this industry. One man in the radio network is saying again and again, if you got the money, you have the access. Ethnicity, a serious variable in Trinidad and Tobago, carries with it serious undertones of cultural values. Examination statistics and teacher observations have constantly emphasized that the East Indian family has encouraged and supported its young members to excel in school. While some families of African descent continue to guide their young members to excel, cultural values of success are not as buoyant in the past. I'm still looking at the issue, but I want to emphasize a little the whole issue of geography, because it is a variable that you identified. So geography, and that is geographic location, is normally discussed in terms of access. When we talk about it in terms of access to educational facilities and cultural centers. In the past, we used to include libraries. Now, with the tablet and e-books, technology is leading the way. Nobody has any excuse. Of course, you need the money to buy these things.
Which comes back to that whole economic area.
Right? And I want to conclude that, just summarize and link it to performance. I'm summarizing. In summary, we can conclude, and I am not, when I say we, I am talking about what others have written, because we no sense in reinventing the wheel. The information is there. We have to relate it to our situation. The big boys are aware saying high levels of socioeconomic status, among other factors, tend to contribute towards the quality of students' achievement. It's easier for them to access the wherewithal. Some educators use culturally based explanations of behavior to explain ethnic dominance in student performance. They see excellent student performance as a product, and I emphasize these variables, a product of beliefs, values, norms, and socialization that operate within particular families, communities, or groups. And finally, other educators focus their explanations for student performance on the availability of jobs, economic opportunities, and class structure in certain geographical locations. They say if you come from so-and-so from X, no opportunities there, we don't expect much out of you. So we have to be very careful when we discussing these things glibly. They want to kill the Minister of Education. We have to be careful. Cultural and structural explanations are necessary and they must be combined.
And that's the reason we asked you here this morning, because it's a whole question of context and looking at the whole. Because if you just punch out areas, you're not going to really deal with the situation. Against the backdrop of everything you have identified, there is still the single question, and I don't know if you can or if anyone can handle it, because it's a problem all over the world. What is happening with boys that they are not getting if they are with a girl from the same socioeconomic, from the same geographic location? If they come in from the same area, but there seem to be a fallout of the boys. Why is that, is the question.
Again, we have to look at one single statement. All human behavior is learnt.
Okay.
All human behavior. And I'm saying, let me say a few things on that. If all human behavior is learnt, we are saying how boys and girls perceive things of phenomena is learnt. They learn to perceive this. There's a lady, and I have not been able to pronounce her word, her name properly. And I'm pronouncing her name because R-I-S-E is rise. Her name is L-I-S-E. So I say Lies. Lies Elliott. Mm-hmm. That's a neuroscientist. She has a book, Pink Brain, Blue Brain. That's the name of the book. She is saying that it's wrong to believe that boys' brains are different from girls' brains. And she's saying that against the number of people who inclusively have been seeking a difference. You remember this debate on Mars and Venus and man and that is nonsense. Women learn to behave the way they are. She argues that boys and girls do not necessarily naturally perceive things differently. They have learned this. What she's saying, the whole idea of stereotyping. You remember your day when you're crying and your mother will tell you, big boys don't cry? But you learn to feel that to be a man, don't cry. You're destroying yourself when you don't cry, but you don't know that. So she's saying that stereotyping and generating expectations, your word comes up there. Generating expectations tend to prescribe the way girls and boys are taught. And what they can do or cannot do. They see things in keeping with how they were socialized. Yes, we have a long way to go to understand how the brain works. Nobody could say that they know everything about that yet, yes. So that is the best thing I could tell you right now, that the whole idea of stereotyping and generating expectations. And if you look at how we bring up our girls and how we bring up our boys, you'll see we have been unwittingly contributing to it and we are not aware of it.
The part that throws me every time is to understand it is many of the studies, as you have seen yourself, speak that the underachieving in boys is associated generally with a negative attitude towards school. Why?
Well, again, let me share this with you. This is very interesting. Let me share that with you.
It is 11:34 in the morning, listeners, in case you just tuned in to us. The voice you're hearing is that of Mr. Raymond Hackett. He's our guest this morning. We are talking about the differential in the educational achievement of boys and girls. And of course, as you would realize, that will encompass dealing with the whole, the many contributory factors involved in it. And that led me to my question here, because I have seen the studies. I've even seen where you identified a couple of them and said this attitude towards school is a major situation. Of course it is, but go ahead and detail.
Well, I started off by telling you the school is an open system. And I also tell you, if it is an open system, it has an internal environment, and it also has to face the external environment. In the modern world, the external environment is boss. It permeates all organizations in the world. And here we have some findings explaining why boys operate the way they do. First one, negative cultural messages about masculinity. In your day, who was a man? In the days of Tarzan, who was a man? There's this word we call the rite of passage. What you had to go through to become a man. Now a man is a fellow who has bling. So negative cultural messages. Poor reading habits among boys, which make it difficult for them to be comfortable with the content across the curriculum. And when you go that way, you experience something we call cumulative deficiencies. And as you go along, you're like in quicksand, you continue sinking. No return unless the explode comes up.
Stay with me at the beginning, at the top of that, however. Why is there a problem with reading from the onset? Just let me be clear on, we're looking at the multiplying factor. I just want to go at the genesis for a moment.
Yes, no problem. Two things are responsible for this. First of all, reading is a language. Language is a form of communication. Remember that biblical thing, the Tower of Babel, when men were trying to go to heaven? Because they couldn't communicate, things just came to a standstill. All right, what is responsible for that? I recall my mother, thank God bless her soul, she insisted on reading for us. That time we vexed because we want to go and play the boys football and cricket outside, and you telling me about reading and music? So we apart from that, they spent a lot of times, and girls are very good at complying. And they complied and succeeded. But I want to consider something here for you. Back to this macho concept of masculinity. Do you know that this is a Western Hemisphere problem? And again, we refer to socialization, which tends to affect boys' academic performance and also alienate them from the values of high academic achievement. You're a nerd, you know that word?
Yes, unfortunately, that is supposed to be something very bad to their detriment.
Yes.
Quite frankly.
So if you excel, you're a nerd. And one more thing, boys are allowed more freedom as opposed to girls, who spend a significant number of hours at home to complete educational tasks. Let me just end with this statement. I have 3 brothers. One is in Germany right now. He lives there. And he met me just recently. He said, boy, you know, I thought you were a madman. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, boy, how a man could stay in a room whole day doing maths? You had to be mad. This is a man he was talking to who got 0 regularly for tests in maths. And I told myself, enough is enough. The best maths teacher is you. And I went to it and I got it. Came back to the very school and taught maths. So boys don't believe in that. That's stick-to-itiveness. The girls, they're very good at that. That's it. I suppose ladies will come me for that. That is why ladies may be dangerous, because they don't give up, so.
No, I'm not trying to get you any mace here this morning. Don't get yourself in trouble.
Yes.
But yes, I get the point now, and cumulatively what you have is a pylon, and somewhere in the education they go like, I'm not doing this well. This is not going to work for me. Let me turn away, and then you take that and couple it with, and here is the juxtaposition here. You take that and you couple that with the blink is the statement of the man. Then there is less disposition to learn anything further. You cut the education at that point, and you try to go on. Is that what you're saying? That's what we're saying.
That's what we're saying. Not only that, quick money. Why waste time studying and you could be good at football and get the word, or cricket, or even sing?
There's going to be a situation now of recognition of all these factors. How do we bring them into a place where we can benefit the minds generally? And I'm not using it include the minds of the boys, but minds generally. It brings me to an article that you wrote in 2014. I was reading that yesterday, and you said the point that you're making is that while it is laudable to be enthusiastic over effective schools, you were making the point about schools and the ones that excel and the ones that don't excel. excel. You say it must be noted that effective schools simply do not appear on the success platform. I take that, and I'm adding here, it is not just the school but also the child. They must be created and cannot be wished into existence. You're asking for our schools to be effective. You're saying that they must be managed and led by leaders who can and know they can make a difference. You also identified a list of people that must be recognized in order for the schools to become effective learning institutions. I'm going to ask you to elaborate on that after we take a break and come back. My guest this morning inside Brunch is Raymond Hackett. We come back and continue our conversation.